opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
You never sign your signature exactly the same way.
Tonight on Politics Now, election officials tell us how they compare signatures on ballots and if the process they use, when they don't match.
Susie Lee is attacking me. She's attacking my family on TV nonstop.
We dig into Congressional District 3, the race for that seat where Republican Dan Rodimer defends himself against allegations he's dangerous and violent. Plus,
basically, he's running on a record of basically being pro-Trump, and he's holding on to those coattails.
Incumbent Congresswoman Susie Lee responds to attacks. She's a puppet for Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi.
From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now.
Early voting for the general election is officially underway in Nevada. Thank you for joining us here on Politics Now. I'm John Langler. So early voting started today. It runs until October 30th. There are 48 in-person voting locations. However, the dates and the times for them here in Clark County vary, so check them out at 8newsnow.com first. Mail-in ballots are also out. Some have already been returned. You can drop them off at the in-person locations or just put them in the mail. Here in Clark County, more than 1.2 million ballots were sent out, 516,000 to Democrats, 357,000 to registered Republicans. 388,000 were sent to registered nonpartisan or other parties. So far, 47,000 ballots have been returned, about 4%. The breakdown, you see it on your screen, 27,000 by Democrats, 9,000 by Republicans, and 10,000 by nonpartisan voters. Not a large amount, but Democrats are taking a big early lead. Now, we have been getting a lot of questions from you about election integrity. President Donald Trump has questioned Nevada's process and says it might be stolen. The concern is about the mail-in ballots and whether they could lead to fraudulent votes. The I-Team's Vanessa Murphy takes a closer look at signature verification.
Each signature on each ballot in Nevada must be verified.
So the first step in that process is running it through our mail ballot processing system.
Registrar Joe Gloria says in Clark County, each ballot is scanned. Software determines whether the voter's signature matches the signature on file from multiple sources, like voter registration or even a driver's license. If the machine rejects the ballot, election workers take a look. If 2 workers decide the signatures do not match, they are advised to contact the voter.
We must statutorily contact that voter and give them an opportunity to cure that ballot.
Gloria says a voter can respond through the Secretary of State's app, where they can sign an affidavit and provide their Nevada driver's license or ID. Or through the registrar, they can provide answers to 3 questions about personal information so their ballot is counted. For a ballot to be rejected in the first place, there has to be significant differences.
You never sign your signature exactly the same way 2 times. There's always going to be slight little differences, but the counties are looking for those indicators of differences, and if there's multiple of those and significant, then the signature will be rejected.
Wayne Thorley is the Deputy Secretary of State for Elections.
Is that enough to prevent voter fraud?
It is, and it's also no different than identification that is done at the polling place. Signature verification is not unique to voting by mail. If we were doing exclusively in-person voting, we would be verifying voters' identities by signature also. When a person goes to the polling place, they are asked to sign the roster, also called a poll book, and then that signature they put on the poll book or the roster is compared to the signature that the county has on file for the voter.
During the primary, more than 12,000 ballots were initially rejected, about 2.5% of the total number of votes, according to the Secretary of State's office. Nearly 7,000 were not counted because they couldn't be resolved. Gloria says the machines in Clark County are programmed the same way they were for the primary.
How can you explain what the margin of error is?
That's difficult to do. If it meets the requirement, then there's an algorithm in place that the system uses for the first check. After that, there's forensic training that my staff goes through that they pass on to the election staff. that goes through and verifies those signatures.
Thornley says the Secretary of State's office does not check voting machines in Clark County because there's no law requiring that oversight. He also says Secretary of State Barbara Cegavske has been an advocate for a voter ID requirement which does not exist in Nevada. Vanessa Murphy, 8 News Now.
Now, we have information on how you can register to vote and a lot more about the election at 8newsnow.com. Meanwhile, the presidential campaign wound its way through Las Vegas this week. On Monday, Ivanka Trump, President Trump's daughter, she stopped at Legends Ranch near Windmill and Las Vegas Boulevard, campaigning for her father. She spoke with former White House Press Secretary Hogan Gidley about manufacturing jobs in the country. Former Secretary of State and one-time Democratic presidential candidate John Kerry campaigned, as you see here, on behalf of Joe Biden in Las Vegas. He told the I-Team's David Charnes a Biden administration would support recent peace deals between Israel and other Middle Eastern countries.
Would the Biden administration continue to uphold those deals, and is this something that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris support?
Absolutely. Joe Biden and Kamala have both welcomed the initiative of the United Arab Emirates, the UAE. They took the initiative. They're the ones who live in the region. They're the ones who get the flack if there is flack. And they had the courage to stand up and to actually sort of cement what had already been a changing relationship with the state of Israel. But Joe Biden is a very, very pro-Israel. There's a long record of support for Israel.
And of course, other candidates and other members of the different campaigns were in Las Vegas as well. Donald Trump Jr. was in Las Vegas on Wednesday night in the northeastern part of the valley at an engineering firm called Civil Works. Trump Jr. told 8 News Now the ways his father's COVID diagnosis has influenced his opinion on the virus.
Anyone who goes around him has to be tested on a daily basis, literally. And he was still able to get it, but he was also, he's a 74-year-old guy that probably eats a little too much McDonald's, and he walked out in 2 days. So I think you can take it seriously. You can take reasonable precautions.
About 150 people attended that event, and it included speeches from other prominent Nevada GOP leaders, including State Party Chair Michael McDonald. We put the full interviews with John Kerry, Donald Trump Jr., and others on our website. Just look for the 2020 Election Interviews tab at 8newsnow.com, and you can watch all of the interviews from other candidates as well. Senate confirmation hearings for Supreme Court nominee Judge Amy Coney Barrett wrapped up on Thursday in Washington. On Capitol Hill, Judge Barrett declined to answer many questions from Democratic senators. She said she didn't want to prejudge an issue that might come up in a case. Meanwhile, Republicans spent the hearings defending her.
I would be afraid to ask her about the presence of gravity on Earth. She may decline to answer because it may come up in a case.
Certainly, there is nothing about this nominee that can be left as suggesting that she's anything other than an extraordinarily gifted jurist.
Democrats claim they haven't had adequate time to review Judge Barrett's nomination. The question is, well, what stood out? Let's ask our Washington, D.C. correspondent, Alexandra Limon, with a look at what we've learned from the hearings during the week and what came up that could derail the nomination moving forward. Alex.
Hey there. Well, I would say that one of the things that really stood out is how different these confirmation hearings were compared to Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings. They were a lot more civil and cordial, the interactions between the senators and the nominee, and also a lot more informative. We did learn a little bit about her family, her past, her time on the 7th Court of Appeals, and also about her faith. That was something that came up a lot. She is a Catholic and she is pro-life. But the argument that Republican senators tried to mount here is that she can and has in her past separate her personal religion and her views from her rulings on the court, that she takes her job very seriously and that she will be able to do that. On the other hand, Democrats say they highly doubt that. They have their doubts, in part because President Trump has tweeted a lot that he expects his nominees to the Supreme Court to quote unquote do the right thing and kind of things like that, which they say that makes them worry and skeptical.
Well, you alluded to some of the Supreme Court cases on the horizon. We've got the vote now scheduled for next week. Let's talk about the timeline and why, specifically for Republicans, they want to get her confirmed before a lot of these things on the horizon come to present day.
So the Senate Judiciary Committee is going to be voting on October 22nd to advance Barrett's nomination to the full Senate. So that's a Thursday. And Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said that the full Senate will begin a debate on her nomination the very next day. That's a Friday. So we do expect that debate to carry over into the following week. But also we expect that, that last full week of October, that's when the full Senate will vote a final vote on Barrett's confirmation to the Supreme Court. We do expect that she will be confirmed because Republicans do have enough votes to accomplish that.
And that was Alexandra Limon from Washington, D.C. Next on Politics Now, making their case for Congress.
And when you look at the voting record of Susie Lee, you see that she voted 99% with Nancy Pelosi and 95% with AOC.
Dan Rodheimer tells us why he says he's going to put Nevada first and the integrity of the election here in the Silver State. We're also going to hear from his opponent, Susie Lee, the incumbent, on her top priority.
Welcome back to Politics Now.
The race in Congressional District 3. It has had the most money spent, and it's the most contentious. It features incumbent Democrat Susie Lee versus Republican challenger Dan Rodheimer. According to Open Secrets, Lee has spent more than $788,000 for her re-election. Rodheimer has spent $685,000. Millions more has been spent by outside groups. Now, there is no candidate debate in this race. The I-Team's Vanessa Murphy interviewed both candidates this week to help you make an informed decision. Here's her discussion with Dan Rodheimer.
Can you name 3 specific bills you would try to pass?
There's certain things that we need to work on. Right now, and it's really pathetic because you hear Republicans, there's some Republicans that are, on certain topics that I get frustrated with. Democrats, like Social Security. They're like, everybody's giving up on it. I think there's no way I will ever vote on a bill that will defund or take away Social Security from our seniors. Healthcare. Right now, I don't believe in socialized medicine. I just don't. Susie Lee does. I do not. I believe that we should have, competitive healthcare. And, I told everybody, I will never take anybody off the current healthcare system. I'll make sure everybody has good healthcare, or have healthcare. But, I will never vote on anything where, they won't allow you to come on with a pre-existing condition. We need to protect these people. And a lot of Republicans, they don't have the backbone to say, we're going to protect pre-existing conditions. I'm very, very passionate about a few things. Social Security, healthcare, jobs, and school. School's another one. I am a huge advocate for school choice.
Susie Lee did not agree to a debate. What do you want to say about that?
Well, I think the people here in Nevada have the right to hear from both sides. I think they should. The fact is my background, yes, I was a former WWE pro wrestler. I was probably the worst wrestler in the WWE, but I was very good on the microphone. And in law school, when I went to law school, I wasn't the best student. I was a B student, but I was very good at debating. These are the attributes that I will bring to Congress. In addition to being a small business owner here in Nevada, we own restaurants here. And, it's very, very frustrating that folks can't hear both sides. And right now, all you're seeing is Susie Lee is attacking me. She's attacking my family on TV nonstop.
We've heard President Trump question the integrity of this election. Will you accept the election results in Nevada?
Look, people come to me all the time, and they're worried about fraud, and they're worried about, ballot harvesting. It's legal here. I mean, it is legal. Republicans argue about it all the time. Well, it's not right, it's not right. But, if that's the law of the land, you can do it, then, you're going to see folks out there doing it. Now, do I think, if we find out that other people are filling them out and people are signing other people's names and they have proof of it, then yes, I would expect, if it was either side, I'd expect Susie Lee to do it or Dan Rodheimer to do it. But I hope that there will not be, any fraud. And I encourage everybody, if you want your ballot to count, you should probably go in person and vote in person, either early voting or even absentee.
Despite COVID-19?
If you feel safe to go out and vote in person early, I would recommend it.
As Rodheimer mentioned, he is a former professional wrestler. He and his wife now own a vegan taco shop here in town. They have 6 kids, including one that was born less than a month ago. Coming up next here on Politics Now, Susie Lee lists her priorities.
As I've said before, I am a one-issue Congresswoman at this point.
We'll tell you what she says is her #1 priority in Congress.
You're watching Politics Now.
And we are back with more on the race in Congressional District 3. Democrat incumbent Susie Lee is taking on Republican challenger Dan Rodheimer, and she spoke with the I-Team's Vanessa Murphy.
And my first question is about some endorsements, maybe unexpected, like the Review Journal, Chamber of Commerce, usually going Republican, but they endorsed you. What do you want to say about that?
Well, listen, I am proud to have those endorsements, and I think it's a reflection of the work that I've done in Congress since I've been there for 2 years of really trying to work with both parties across the aisle in a bipartisan manner to get things done that are so important to Nevada families. And I think there's a recognition that I'm putting politics aside and trying to get progress and solve problems. As you know, I joined the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a caucus of 25 Democrats and 25 Republicans when I first came to Congress. And really, that was my commitment to the constituents of Congressional District 3, that they actually want to see a member of Congress who's going to try to outreach and build relationships with members of both parties.
Joe Biden finally said he is not a fan of court packing. What are your thoughts?
Listen, my thoughts are right now we are faced with the most major crisis, at least in my lifetime, in this country, this pandemic. Families are on the brink of collapse. Businesses are on the brink of bankruptcy. And this administration is choosing to rush through Supreme Court hearings at this point, looking at basically being able to place a justice on the court just in time for the Supreme Court hearing on the Affordable Care Act, which would take away protections for pre-existing conditions from millions of Americans. So I find it that right now, as I've said before, I am a one-issue Congresswoman at this point. I think the biggest issue facing Congress right now is making sure we get another package past the finish line onto the president's desk and signed.
Moving on to Dan Rodheimer. One of his attack ads claims that you are Nancy Pelosi's puppet. What do you want to say about that?
Dan Rodheimer is taking a book out of the Republican Party playbook. And basically, I think that my endorsements speak for themselves. The Review Journal, the Chamber of Commerce. I've been ranked by the Lugar Center, which ranks members based on their bipartisanship as one of the most bipartisan members of Congress. And so I think it's a false attack, but it's basically one that is being played all across this country by Republicans who are going after seats held by Democrats. And, but then you have to look at what Rodheimer's record is. And basically he's running on a record of basically being pro-Trump, and he's holding on to those coattails. And so I think it's an interesting attack.
You can watch more of the interview with Susie Lee, the Congresswoman, and Dan Rodheimer, her challenger, at 8newsnow.com. Look for the 2020 election interviews tab. And while you're there, check out interviews with other candidates running for office as well. Las Vegas Sands Review Journal owner and GOP mega donor Sheldon Adelson making it a late in the game splash in the presidential race. Political reports Adelson gave $75 million to the anti-Joe Biden super PAC Preserve America. That was about 90% of the group's fundraising back in September. The Center for Responsive Politics says Preserve America is now one of the largest outside spenders in politics. And that's after the pro-Biden super PAC Priorities USA and America First, which supports President Trump. President Trump back in Nevada tomorrow. We're going to tell you about his rally up in Elko. And finally, here on Politics Now, here's what we're keeping an eye on in What to Watch. President Donald Trump holding a rally in northern Nevada on Sunday. This is his video from the last rally he had in rural Nevada, September 12th in Minden. Thousands of people were attending there. Sunday's rally is scheduled to be in Elko, but it has since been moved to Carson City. So we're going to watch to see what the crowd size is up there and whether it fits into Nevada's COVID-19 rules. We're also keeping an eye on early voting and mail-in balloting. So far, Democrats have voted at a pace 3 times that of Nevada Republicans. So we're watching to see if that keeps pace or if Republicans can close the gap. Don't forget, early voting is now underway in Nevada. And if you go online to 8newsnow.com, you can find out all the information you need to know about voting, registering, and taking part in the upcoming general election. That'll do it for us here on Politics Now. We thank you very much for watching. Don't forget you can keep tabs on all the political news on 8newsnow.com and watch us every Saturday. Thank you very much.